Hey! You know, it's a trick to take, like, ultra hardcore metaphysics and abstruse topics like incommensurability and consciousness versus mind and make simple little analogies that people could understand. I think I could do a lot of that with a fat pencil and a radio. Kind of the questions, especially in live streams that I often do all the time. I spent most of my life translating ancient Pali. It's an ancient Indo-Aryan Prakrit. Also to Greek, specifically the works of Plotinus, Numenius, Proclus, Syrianus, Damascius, on and on and on. Is that they all kind of said the same thing, but they said it in different ways, and the reason for that is nothing is known except through the modality of the knower. You know, a fish will describe things in watery terms, a human will describe things in different terms, right? It's kind of like, depends on the culture you're in, you'll use different analogies to actually illustrate things such that someone would actually have an illumination as far as the nature of what's going on to answer their questions. Especially, it's very hard to do this in metaphysics because we're actually talking about things that are subjective. They're actually not objective things for analysis, and this is, of course, where the ancient Pythagoreans developed really magical tools, almost really seriously magical tools called retroduction, apophaticism, to see into the nature of being. And whether it be Greek or Indian or Egyptian, they all said the same thing, and I'm not interested in parroting what they said, but you know, as a translator of their texts, you know, I could talk about it, you know, in modern day language using a radio and a pencil here. And the question that I often hear all the time in live chat, and people ask this stuff to like religiously, and I have nothing to do with religion. Religions divide people. Spirituality actually brings people together, but spirituality is a bad term, and specifically the word would be metaphysics. Is that people say, what happens when we die? And the question itself, and of course the question is one of ignorance, because if someone knew the answer to it, they wouldn't ask the question, right? And it's okay to ask questions. Actually, one of the most noble things to be is to be ignorant, ask questions. The people that are evil are the idiots that don't know but tell everybody else that they do know. So it's okay not to know. By the way, when it comes to a true path of a wisdom seeker, someone that puts wisdom above all else, and the only two important things in life are wisdom, but wisdom is not about life, it's about transcending life, and self-reliance. The most important fact is that when you actually seek answers and you actually have enough wisdom to know where to seek answers, if you're proven wrong, then that sets you on the correct path. If you're proven right, then that means you're on the correct path. And that is so, so very important. You won't hear that from anybody out there. And let's repeat that again because it's so very important. When you actually ask questions, you should question yourself, and you should actually question the nature of existence, which of course is true. You know, if you're actually interested in that, instead of being a money-grubbing scumbag, you know, trying to die with the most toys, is that if you are proven wrong, if you love wisdom and truth above all else, that makes you happy. It's like, well, I used to believe in BS and nonsense, but I've been steered on the correct path by truth, logic, and wisdom. And now, because nobody is their beliefs. People only get upset. You listening? People only get upset when they're proven wrong because they ignorantly, and this is evil itself. This is literally evil. They think they are their beliefs. Nobody is their beliefs. So when you're proven wrong, that's a very good thing. When you're proven right, that's also a very good thing. And that's so very important. But getting back to the question of, so what happens when we die? It's an extremely ignorant question, but it's okay. What dies? Every ancient culture, be it Greek or Indian, all forms of hardcore, wise, monistic metaphysics, says what dies is not the self. Obviously, that is the case. Kind of a perfect, don't take the analogy too far, by the way, of a radio, right? But I ask the question of you, by stating that there is no soul inside the body is not a denial of the soul. It's saying that the soul is not in the body. Yeah, the body doesn't have a soul, and the radio doesn't have a signal.
Federal government provides $150 billion.
Is there a signal in the radio, or is the signal?
Completing the free application for federal student aid.
I love this cute little radio. It's a Sony, a really old, kind of antique, rather rare radio. Is there a signal in the radio? And the answer is no. He said, well, the signal, you have an antenna right here. My antenna's a little bent, by the way, kind of like me. The radio tunes the signal, but there's no signal in the radio. There's no little people. There's no real fire inside this iMac display. It's consubstantial. It's a signal that's actually tuned. And by the way, the antenna of life is this interesting dipole, which is called the hydrous oxide molecule, otherwise known as water, which is also, too, the same molecular geometry tattooed here on the back of my hand: oxygen, hydrogen, hydrogen. This is also, too, the Pythagorean triangle, the 108, 36, 36 triangle. This is the only triangle of incommensurability, by the way, which is 1, 1, phi, and the slope of 1 over phi. It is literally incommensurability itself. And this specific isosceles triangle in triplicate is the Pythagorean pentagram. It actually belonged to peoples way before the Pythagoreans. But anyway, the antenna of life is, of course, water. So getting back to the question, what happens when we die? What dies, every ancient... It's not my opinion, this is a fact, and it's also logical, and it's a set of wisdom. A statement said from the position of wisdom, is that obviously what dies is not the self. The identification phenomenology of seeing self in what is not self, the ancient Pali term anatta. The most repeated phrase in ancient Pali, which I translated for decades, is isokaya namisata. The body is not my soul. It shouldn't say my soul, because my soul implies possession. Nothing has a soul, meaning one thing has a soul. Tattvamasi, that thou art. You are the soul. It's not your soul or my soul or his soul, but for sake of vernacular and parlance, we would say my soul. But of course, from the standpoint of absolute metaphysics, we don't actually have to split hairs on that. So there's obviously not a signal inside the radio. So the question then becomes, intelligently, logically, and from the standpoint of wisdom, what happens to the signal when we smash the hell out of the radio?
All your car service needs at 760 Westland Drive here in Lexington. Commercial began 253.
By the way, let's actually go further down that path. What would be the definition of someone very, very sick or dying? That's where the body is no longer able to accurately tune or completely gives out, and that of course is death, tune the signal anymore. So this would be like, let me see here.
One who is deprived of spiritual joy goes over to carnal pleasures.
Sorry about that, I didn't mean to tune that channel on purpose, but so this would be like a healthy person, except for the person making this broadcast who's mentally unhealthy. So this would be like a healthy person. Let's say the same person gets old and sick.
What are the signs that a person gets
Yeah, it's the signal becomes, it's kind of like when you drive very far away from a radio station. It's over with. You can't tune the signal anymore. The radio can't tune it anymore. The same thing as a sick person. So there's no signal inside the radio. So when people ignorantly ask, and it's okay to ask the question, because when people ask questions, they actually transcend their beliefs. They are more interested in the truth or seeking the truth than they are in their own pathetic little sick beliefs, which is a wonderful thing. A wonderful position for someone to be in. But what happens when this body dies? And when I say this body, I say what happens when we die. That is not who we are. We can't say what happens when we die, or I die, or you die, or Sally dies. That's not the self. I mean, that's just the radio. Don't take the analogy too far, by the way. And then talking about the broadcast antenna. I mean, don't take the analogy too far. So obviously there's no signal inside the radio. We are not the radio. However, through countless decades, and the fact that the signal, an animated signal, a living signal, kind of would be like a perfect analogy would be like Skynet, an artificial intelligence that actually animates inanimate matter. But in case of Skynet, they would actually know that they're not the animated matter. Rather, they're the signal, the artificial intelligence. Of course, human beings are ignorant. And of course, water is necessary. Water is the dipole, literally, and water is a dipole. It is a polar molecule, by the way. It is a polar molecule for empirical consciousness to manifest. But what precedes empirical consciousness And unfortunately, let's talk about this a second, from the standpoint of hardcore metaphysics vis-a-vis the Greeks and the Indians. From the Greeks, it was the nous, and from the Indians, it's the chitta. However, we don't have a distinction or differentiation between mind and consciousness and brain in English. I mean, these all refer to the same thing, like a lump of flesh between the ears, mind, brain, and consciousness. They're kind of all used interchangeably. However, from the standpoint of metaphysics and wisdom itself, we actually have to distinguish and differentiate out empirical consciousness, the consubstantiality of which goes no further than the animated consubstantial form or being, and ontos. What this means is you pass a white light through a red filter, you're going to see red light, right? You pass white light through a blue filter, you're going to see blue light, correct? Well, that blue light or that red light would be the consubstantiality of chitta in Pali or nous in Greek, and then we would have empirical consciousness. Obviously, so the red light and the blue light that is passed through the filter, the white light that passes through those filters, is consubstantial with the filter. In other words, you destroy or remove the filter, then you've destroyed or removed the light. And as the old saying goes, when this is present, that is present. When this is not present, then that is not present. And people have actually pondered, and this, well, I really have boiled it down very, very succinctly too, by the way. People have looked for the answers to that a long time in ancient texts, and it is about incommensurability and the consubstantiality of matter and signal. Like the signal that I'm actually hearing from this radio, of course there are processors in a radio just like there are processors in a camera, because different sensors can actually have completely different outputs depending on how the camera processes the signal. And the same is actually true of radios, because radios, complex radios, good ones, have tuners and pitch dials, and you could tweak the hell out of what comes out of the speaker, right? Yes, of course that's right. So if this were a better radio, I would actually be able to change the broadcast signal, which is in the ether, obviously so. And every field, including electromagnetic radiation, which this is just an ether perturbation modality. But I would be able to change that. But that changed the tune and the pitch and the volume, obviously, and I'm changing that vis-a-vis the radio. That's consubstantial to and with the radio. It goes no further than the radio. That's the same thing from the position of the ancient Greeks and Indians as far as consubstantiality of consciousness. By the way, in ancient Pali, the term for consciousness, or vijnana, literally means unknowing. Doesn't mean agnosis as in primordial. There are two modalities of agnosis. Primordial agnosis, which is the attribute of the absolute, or the agathon. And then there's conventional or empirical ignorance, which is more appropriately nescience, but we don't need to split hairs on that. But it literally means ignorance. It's prefixual vi in ancient Pali, Romanized Pali, which means the opposite of, or the antithesis to, jnana, or gnosis. So the word for consciousness also means agnosis, and that is metaphysically 100% accurate. We don't have that distinction in English, unfortunately. So when English native speakers actually read these ancient Greek or Pali texts, they don't know what the hell is going on. They completely miss the boat. It goes right over their heads. They don't have the subtle wherewithal to understand what the hell is being said. But it's all about the incommensurability and the consubstantiality of the signal to and with the radio. Because the broadcast signal from this radio, analogously, is not the signal. It is tuned, it is chopped up, the pitch and all of that is, and then it's broadcast to the speaker. That is different than the actual signal itself, which is out here in the ether itself. I think I made that abundantly clear. Now, to tie this video up without talking my lips until they fall off here, when we talk about what happens when we die, of course what dies is not the self. The question is, well, that depends on the wisdom or lack thereof of the being. There's no distinction between an embodied being, i.e. a living person, and a disembodied being, meaning an entity that has no body. In the ancient Pali, the term means manomayakaya. The term is, doesn't mean. The term is manomayakaya, which means mental-made artifice. Kind of a crude translation. It means mental-made artifice. You could actually say ghost, you could say disembodied. I don't give a damn what you call it. But it's manomayakaya. When people say, well, what happens, at death, then you actually have to ask a question, well, what is the state of gnosis or wisdom thereof, as so far as someone disobjectifying from the empirical? The statement, a dead man walking, has a hardcore metaphysical premise in that it means and refers to someone that has died before they physically died. In other words, they say dead man walking. That's what it's actually in reference to. So when someone asks what happens at the time of death, you have to know what the wisdom or lack thereof is at death. Does the person identify with this empirical form, the radio, and bemoan it because they think this is who they are or what they are? Well, if they do, then they're screwed. They're doomed. They're essentially doomed from the premise of all forms of monistic metaphysics. And I'll give you a perfect example with this pencil here. This would be an ignorant person. Say this is the spirit, the entity, that exists before life and exists after life, meaning me, the head. And of course, this is my ignorance, my arm, and desires and grasping after this body, this psychophysical form. This would be the ignorant person. And of course, an ignorant person appropriately is blind. So when an ignorant person, by reason of their ignorance, is grasping on and identifies with this, the body, the psychophysical, the empirical, that piece of crap you see in the mirror in the bathroom, when you identify with this at death, what happens is this. The body is gone, and the disembodied being does this number. Oh, there's another one. There we go. And it all starts again. Again and again and again. However, if ignorance is eradicated by means of wisdom and gnosis, what happens, and this of course is still the body, what happens to someone that is fully liberated or transcended at the time of death, where the body, like the radio breaking down, like this radio's old and it's starting to break down, right? When the body is let go, instead of ignorance being out here like an ignorant person who's perpetually looking for another one, oh, there's another one. This is who I am. This is me. What happens at the time of death is, instead of that, say wisdom has been fulfilled and transcendence is had, is this. This is what happens. This is still the body, the pencil. What happens is this, okay? Alive, and now death has occurred. The body is dropped. There's no more seeking after this, yeah? Because identity is not here. Oh, there's another one. There's another one. The identity is not there. The identity is here. And when the body is dead, that's a dead man walking. Nothing is changed other than the body falls away. Yeah? This is wisdom, dropping the body at the time of death. This is an ignorant, typical scumbag at the time of death when the body is dropped. Oh my God, where is it? I gotta find another one. Where is it? Ah, there we go. There's another one. And it repeats over and over and over. As the Greeks referred to polygenesis, the ancient Pali is punabhavati, which means again becoming. I don't care what word you use. I mean, nature doesn't give a damn about what sort of pathetic words human beings ascribe to things. The only thing that's important is wisdom and understanding, not the damn words we actually give to it. So, I think I was able to describe some of the most abstruse topics of hardcore monistic metaphysics and transcendence ontology using a radio and a pencil. Yeah. I don't think anybody else has accomplished that feat, but I did. I hope you liked this video. If you did, you click the link below. Or you can tell me to take a long walk off a short pier. Whatever makes you happy. Whatever makes you happy. Because I'm unmoved by those things. I'm just a lonely, simple creature living in the world, and all I care about is wisdom. It really is. Not living the high life. I just get asked questions, and I find creative ways of answering them in a language and analogies by which people are able to understand them. Thank you. Lux Veritas.